Hey guys, tonight we're wandering through the ruins of cities that vanished as if swept up in a magician's cloak, stone by stone, life by life, until only whispers and moss remained. Picture yourself, flashlight in hand, picking your way through moonlit streets, where thousands once hurried, laughed and gossiped, but now there's only wind and the soft hush of forgotten footsteps. Shadows fall across pyramids swallowed by roots, palaces empty as broken seashells, a crumbled temple waits, its stones cool beneath your palm, while somewhere out in the darkness, a lonely owl hoots. If you squint, maybe you can almost see children darting through the shadows, hear the sizzle of food from a vanished market. Almost. But let's be honest. If you were actually transported to one of these lost cities tonight, you'd probably trip over a vine, get bitten by a spectacularly large bug, and realize too late that you left your snake repellent at home. You probably won't survive this, at least not without a tetanus shot and a firm grasp of ancient evacuation routes. The good news, here you get to stay cozy, drifting through ancient dust with only a little gentle dread and none of the actual hazards. So before we go any further, if this quiet space makes you feel even a little less alone, you can like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you lying awake in a quiet room at 2 a.m.? Or maybe starting your day in a rainy city? Eyes still heavy? Drop your time and place in the comments. Let's remind each other we're not alone out here. Now dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey together here on Timeless Sleep. You start your journey with the crunch of soft earth beneath your feet, wandering through the skeletal remains of a city no one expected to vanish. For a moment, you wonder who first found these ruins, a lost hunter, a wild dog, maybe a daring child chasing after a ball. Whoever it was, they'd have known right away that something wasn't right. Because here's the truth. Cities are stubborn things. They cling to life. They don't just empty themselves overnight. Or do they? Everywhere you look, the ruins lean at odd angles, overgrown but still defiant, like an old man who refuses to move out of his creaky chair. In the hush, you sense layers of life, stacked like ancient lasagna, some spicy, some bland, all left half-eaten by history. A pottery shard crunches under your heel. Is it just a bowl, or someone's favorite bowl? Did they hurl it in a panic, running from some disaster, or did it tumble unnoticed during the last quiet breakfast ever eaten here? You wander on. A mossy plaza opens up before you, moonlight painting ghostly benches and doorways. The wind picks up, rustling the long grass that's pushed its way between broken stones. You see the outline of a grand avenue, wide enough for parades or maybe a rowdy wedding procession. Now only a deer's silent path. For a moment, the scent of rain-damp earth is so strong you're almost sure you'll see lanterns flicker to life and hear laughter spill from empty doorways. But no, there's only you and the distant croak of a frog staking his claim to this kingdom of echoes. You pause beside what once might have been a merchant's stall. There's a toppled jar, and peeking from the mud, the remains of a delicate comb. Was it dropped by a harried mother, hands full of squirming children, or left behind by a merchant who fled, never to return? These cities, so grand, so carefully built, didn't just fade, they vanished, leaving behind 1,000 silent mysteries and a whole lot of lost combs. You duck beneath a heavy lintel, the stone cool and ancient beneath your hand. Dust sifts from above. Maybe some of it's from centuries ago, maybe some of it's just your own clumsy intrusion. The air inside is thick, almost syrupy, with the smell of old secrets, and just maybe ghostly feet padding softly behind you. You can't help but imagine a bustling day here. Men bargaining for fish, women chattering as they mend clothes. Children splashing in a fountain that's now nothing more than a dry, mossy bowl. What happened? Did they all leave together? A long snake of families winding out of the city, never looking back? Or did it happen slowly? One empty house, then another until the last candle flickered out. You move on, following a crumbling wall around what was probably a garden. Now, weeds have taken over, But you spot something strange, a single, stubborn rose blooming where someone's careful hands once tended neat rows of beans and herbs. Life finds a way, you think, but it can't always hold back the night forever. And when night comes for a city, it doesn't knock politely. It seeps in, silent and steady, swallowing song and laughter alike. Above you, the stars glitter, a reminder that time keeps moving, no matter how much a place wants to stand still. You can almost hear the city's heartbeat in the hush, slow fading, but never truly gone. That's the thing about these vanished places. They linger in the air, in the shadows, in the soft hush of wind through stone. The people are gone, but their stories cling stubbornly, like burrs on your socks. As you move deeper into the ruins, you stumble across a faded mural on the wall of what might have been a temple or someone's fancy living room. Honestly, ancient architecture is just as confusing as IKEA instructions. The paint's cracked, but you can make out figures dancing, feasting, maybe praying to gods now long out of business. You try to imagine the last time someone gazed at this wall. Did they laugh at the awkward pose of the dancers? Or was there fear in their eyes as the city emptied around them? It's hard to say, maybe both. A faint breeze sighs through broken windows. You think about the word abandon, how final it sounds. But is it? If you listen closely, every ruin has its own kind of pulse, a slow, stubborn echo of life. Maybe, in a way, these cities aren't truly empty at all. Maybe they're just waiting for curious wanderers like you, and for stories to fill their empty halls again. You sit for a moment on a sun-warmed stone, letting your fingers trace the carvings left by hands, much older than yours. It hits you. Every vanished city was someone's entire world. Their grocery store, their gym, their favorite noodle spot. And then, one day, that world was just gone. Poof. Like you waking up and discovering that your entire town has been erased overnight, leaving only squirrels to judge your pajamas. You wander onward, down what might have been a grand boulevard, weeds reaching for your ankles. The silence is heavy, but not unfriendly, a bit like when you arrive way too early at a party, and the host hasn't put out the snacks yet. You know you're not really alone here. History's watching, breathing down your neck. Don't worry, it's mostly friendly. At the edge of the city, you find yourself standing before a low, broken wall, overlooking the wilds beyond. Once this might have been a bustling market gate, busy with traders and travellers. Now the only traffic is a line of ants determinedly dragging a crumb to their own miniature metropolis. It makes you smile, just a little. Some cities last for centuries, others for only a season, but ambition is ambition even if you're tiny and have 6 legs. The moon is higher now, shadows stretched long and thin. You glance back at the city, its ruins bathed in silver. There's a weird comfort in knowing that so many places have come and gone, so many lives lived and lost. It makes your own worries feel lighter. After all, if a city can survive storms, invaders, and 1,000 years of squirrels, maybe you can survive whatever tomorrow throws at you. Even if it's just another Zoom call or, heaven forbid, your neighbor's late-night trombone practice. As you rise and dust off your hands, you make a quiet promise to remember these empty cities, not just as dead places, but as old friends, full of laughter, loss, and stubborn beauty. Places that remind you how fragile, and yet how stubbornly hopeful, every human world really is. And with that, you wander back into the shadows, heart a little fuller, step a little lighter. The vanished cities may be silent, but tonight their stories echo softly, carried on the wind and tucked gently into your dreams. You find yourself wading through the heavy hush of a land haunted by secrets. The very soil seems to cradle stories, pressing them gently into the soft moss. The moon is high, and the air almost tastes like old paper, as you step into a mystery that has captivated dreamers, historians, and wayward night-thinkers alike. The lost colony of Roanoke. It's not just any ghost town. This is the American original, the Where Did Everyone Go that launched 1,000 conspiracy theories and at least as many bad History Channel specials. Here, the silence feels deliberate, as if the trees themselves are keeping secrets. Picture this: a humid island off the coast of what is now North Carolina. The year is 1587. You're a settler, sweaty, bewildered, possibly sunburned beyond all dignity. Around you, houses made from rough-hewn logs huddle together like survivors at a disappointing picnic. You hear laughter, babies crying, the creak of wagons, and the distant snap of wood as your neighbors finish building someone's roof. It's a fragile little world, hopeful but wary, pressed in on all sides by forest and sea. And then, like a magician yanking away a tablecloth, everything is gone. When John White, the colony's governor, returns from a supply run to England, delayed, as only 16th century travel can be, by wars, storms, and maybe a few rounds of Tudor karaoke, he finds nothing but abandoned cabins and the word Searotoan carved into a fence post. No bodies, no blood, no note pinned to a door. Gone fishing, be back never. Not even a complaint about the mosquitoes, just emptiness. If this were a group chat, everyone left without saying goodbye. You wander through the eerily tidy clearing, imagining what it was like to be the first person to realize the whole town was just not there anymore. Maybe the silence thudded in your ears. Maybe you called out, half expecting someone to shout back, "Surprise! We're hiding behind the corn." But there's only the sea breeze, and maybe the faint sense that you're being watched by the ghosts of curiosity itself. The theories begin to pile up like firewood, each one a little more outlandish than the last. Were the colonists kidnapped by local tribes? Did they assimilate willingly, or did something darker happen in the night? Did disease sweep through like a bad rumor, leaving only footprints and the echo of children's laughter behind? Or, as one theory suggests, thanks internet, were they all whisked away by aliens desperate for someone who could teach them how to make a decent meat pie? Let's be honest, you'd probably settle for something simple, like a runaway band of settlers who just got tired of waiting for supplies. But the truth is, the mystery remains. The only thing more persistent than the mosquitoes at Roanoke is the human urge to explain what can't be explained. If you stand still in the clearing, letting the damp grass soak through your shoes, you might almost hear the old arguments circling in the wind, historians bickering, authors scribbling, local kids daring each other to spend a night alone where the cabins once stood. But the quiet is too deep for answers tonight. Instead, you drift further, letting your senses fill with the textures of this vanished world. A strip of old fencing juts out of the ground like a single tooth. A handful of broken crockery glints under a tangle of roots. You kneel and brush dirt from a bead, someone's necklace, or maybe a keepsake left behind in haste. Your heart beats a little faster, because here's the thing. Every lost object feels like a whisper, a gentle nudge from the past saying, "We were here, we mattered. Even if you can't find our footprints, we danced in this very spot." It's the little details that get you. Did someone leave the fire burning, expecting to return? Did a child drop a wooden toy, glancing back one last time as their family slipped away into the woods? Was there fear, or just the quiet decision to move on? Did they go willingly to Croatoan Island, hoping for something better, or did they dissolve into the land, becoming stories for the generations who would come after? And then, of course, there's that word, Searotoan. You roll it around in your mind, tasting its strangeness. It feels half like a password, half like a warning. To the colonists, it was the name of an island, a nearby community. To us, centuries later, it's become a kind of incantation, shorthand for all the things we'll never know. The only thing missing is someone carving BRB underneath. You wander down to the shore, the wind snapping at your clothes. The sea here is a little too dark, a little too restless, as if it too is waiting for answers. Maybe someone rowed away from the colony, watching the lights fade behind them, hoping for rescue or reinvention. Maybe the waves swallowed the evidence long ago, leaving behind nothing but rumor and the lingering hope that someone somewhere survived. One theory whispers that the settlers tried to blend in with the local Croatoan tribe, learning to fish, farm, and live in tune with the land, shedding their Englishness like a too heavy coat. It's a comforting thought, the idea of lost people finding new roots, but other whispers are not so kind. Talk of conflict, disaster, desperation. You imagine the final days, tension, hunger, a growing sense that no help is coming. The wind off the sea grows colder as the story twists in your mind. You duck beneath the low branches of a live oak, thick with Spanish moss, and try to imagine the last hours before the colony vanished. Did they gather in the moonlight to make a plan? Did they leave a sign for their governor, carving it with careful, hopeful hands, or did they simply slip away one by one until the birds were the only witnesses left? You'd like to believe in hope, the idea that somewhere descendants of the Roanoke settlers still live, their ancestors' story winding through family tales told at campfires. Maybe a faint accent, a peculiar turn of phrase, survived the centuries, even if no one quite remembers why. It's the kind of romantic notion that helps you sleep a little better, even if it's wrapped in centuries of dust. Yet as you stand here, ankle deep in mystery, it's the silence that's most haunting of all. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of things too deep for words. Maybe that's the true heart of Roanoke's mystery. The fact that sometimes, no matter how clever we think we are, we simply can't know. Sometimes a city or a town or a single soul just slips quietly out of history's spotlight, leaving only questions in their wake. You shuffle your feet, scaring up a startled rabbit, and let your mind wander to the families who called this place home. Did they pack their bags with the same ordinary anxieties we carry? Forgotten socks, worries about the weather, arguments over who gets the good seat in the boat. Did they look over their shoulders, hoping someone would remember their names long after they were gone? It's easy to romanticize the lost colony, but you know the truth was probably messier, more human. Maybe it was hunger, disease, or the endless uncertainty of living on the edge of the world. Maybe they simply ran out of patience. After all, who among us hasn't wanted to run away and start over somewhere new, far from the judgments of nosy neighbors and the tyranny of shared chores? Your feet find the soft earth of what might have been a garden, now gone feral. Wild mint brushes your ankles, its scent rising like a forgotten memory. You stoop and pluck a sprig, pressing it between your fingers. Once this place was home, real, messy, noisy, alive, and then suddenly, it wasn't. You hold the mint to your nose, letting the scent ground you in the here and now. Around you, the night grows quieter, as if the land is settling back into its ancient sleep. A distant owl calls, and the stars glimmer in their own silent conversation. You're struck by how normal the extraordinary can become, the way entire cities, entire worlds can simply dissolve into myth if we're not careful. Maybe the real magic of Roanoke is that it reminds us everything we take for granted, our homes, our routines, even the shape of our days can slip away faster than we realize. But for now, you're still here. You stretch, bones creaking, and take one last look at the place where so many once dreamed of a better life. The grass, the wind, the stars, they remain, patient and forgiving. You whisper a good night to the ghosts of Roanoke, promising to remember them not just as a mystery but as people full of hope, full of flaws, very much like yourself. And as you leave, the land exhales behind you, folding its secrets gently back into the moss and sand, waiting for the next curious soul to come wandering through the night, asking questions the world may never quite answer. You move softly onward, leaving behind Roanoke's salted winds and restless ghosts, and suddenly you're wrapped in humid, tangled green. The air thickens, velvet on your skin, as you step through the swaying curtain of a rainforest. You brush aside leaves as wide as shields, and underfoot, roots writhe and twist like lazy snakes. This is the land of the Maya, the ancient architects of stone cities that shone so brightly they were said to rival the stars. Tonight, you're walking where the jungle now rules, but you can feel the heartbeat of lost empires pulsing through the earth, steady and strong. In the present tense, the Maya world is alive with insects humming, unseen frogs croaking, and somewhere close the yip of a night creature. But close your eyes, and you can almost sense the clang of tools on limestone, the shouts of workers, the constant patter of bare feet over stone. Cities like Tikal, Palenque and Kapan, once mighty enough to defy drought, famine and even each other, are now smothered beneath the heavy quilt of the jungle. For centuries they thrived, boasting astronomical observatories, pyramids like green mountains, and a calendar so precise it could humble your smartphone. And yet almost in a blink, these teeming cities faded from the world stage, leaving behind only mystery and, let's be honest, enough stone steps to challenge your fitness tracker for a lifetime. You find yourself at the foot of a massive staircase, each step a little uneven, weathered by centuries of rain and wandering tapers. The city you're visiting tonight could be any one of a dozen Mayan capitals, but tonight it's all of them, their stories braided together into one long, looping dream. Moss grows between the stones, slick and cold. If you squint, you can see people moving up and down, carrying bundles, gossiping, preparing for a festival that never seems to arrive. The temples loom, their edges softened by vines. Somewhere in the shadows, the ghost of a priest tends a fire, the scent of burning copal rising to mingle with the sweetness of jungle flowers. The Mayan world was never simple. These cities rose from nothing through sheer stubbornness and sweat. No rivers to float giant stones, no horses to haul them, just human hands, ropes, and ambition thicker than the trees overhead. You can almost hear the grunts and laughter of laborers, the barked orders of overseers, and the nervous whispers of scribes who knew that power was a tricky thing, always threatening to slip away just when you needed it most. The light here never feels quite real, dappling your skin with green and gold. You walk through what used to be the city's central plaza, where rulers once appeared in feathered headdresses, tall enough to make any modern fashion influencer jealous. Imagine the crowd, thousands gathered, craning for a glimpse of royalty, murmuring about the latest scandal, who snubbed whom at the last feast, who's wearing the most scandalously embroidered loincloth. Even now, the stones hold warmth from a sun that seems to favor these ruins, even as it speeds their decay. And just as you start to feel at home among these sleeping giants, the enormity of their vanishing sinks in. The Maya didn't disappear in a single moment. It wasn't a meteor strike, a great battle, or a single disease. It was slower, messier, a slow unraveling, like a thread pulling free from a tapestry, until whole cities were simply left to the mercy of vines and silence. Historians will bicker endlessly about why. Some blame drought so fierce that even the cleverest canals ran dry. Others whisper about war, infighting, and the collapse of trade. Some say it was the soil, exhausted, wrung dry by centuries of farming and ritual, and others still believe it was all of these. And something more, the mysterious ways that societies sometimes just let go. You pause to rest at the base of a pyramid, its sides so steep you wonder if ancient architects built them purely to prank future tourists. The view from here, if you could see past the jungle, would once have been breathtaking. Sprawling causeways, gleaming rooftops, the constant bustle of city life. You imagine what it was like when this place still pulsed with music and firelight, when ball games meant everything, and the losing team, well, let's just say you didn't want to lose. It's almost unthinkable that such brilliant, skilled astronomers, mathematicians, artists could just dissolve into the trees, but the jungle is patient. Give it 100 years, and it will eat everything. Stone, bone, even memory. Insects do their slow, diligent work. Roots squeeze mortar until it sighs apart. And in the end, the cities fade not with a bang, but with a gentle green hush. For the Maya, city life was a balancing act. Water, food, the favor of unpredictable gods. When the rains failed, crops withered, and hope grew brittle. A family might pack up in the dead of night, fleeing hunger or a war they couldn't win. Maybe a city's rulers grew weak, or just unpopular. Maybe people got tired of all the sacrifices and pageantry and decided the jungle looked like a better option. At least there were fewer taxes and more howler monkeys. You wander past a toppled stela, its carvings softened to near oblivion. Once these were billboards. This king won a battle. This queen saw a comet. Don't miss tonight's ritual at the big temple. Now they're nothing but puzzles for archaeologists, and a convenient perch for passing iguanas. As you walk, you notice how nature has transformed this city into something half dream, half joke. A saber tree, sacred to the Maya, bursts through the roof of a palace, its roots snaking over mosaic floors. Monkeys swing through the galleries where once nobles paraded, and everywhere the shadows of jaguars flicker at the edge of your vision. At some point you realize you're not walking in the footsteps of a vanished people, but with them. Their world isn't gone, it's just quieter now, harder to read. The Mayan cities are not empty. They are filled with whispers, the rustle of leaves, the giggle of hidden streams, the endless gossip of birds. They're not lost so much as waiting, patient as the moon, for someone to listen. And if you put your ear to a cool stone, you might just hear the faint echo of music, laughter, and the surprisingly sharp complaints of someone who got stuck cleaning the royal latrines. It's tempting to imagine the last family leaving, looking back one final time before slipping into the green. Did they grieve? Did they sigh in relief? Maybe they just promised to return, and the promise slipped out of memory like so many other things. The jungle has a way of erasing footprints, both literal and otherwise. You turn a corner, and suddenly you're standing before a giant ball court, its sides rising steep and high. The Maya loved their games. Maybe a little too much if you ask the losing team, but the rules are a mystery now, the details muddied by time. Some say the games decided matters of life and death. Others claim they were more about bragging rights and betting on your cousin's wildest moves. Whatever the truth, you can almost hear the crowd, feel the tension in the air, smell the sweat and dust, and then, like everything else, the moment passes, the court returns to silence, and only the moon is left to keep score. The collapse of Mayan cities is a lesson in slow change. It didn't happen everywhere at once. Some cities thrived while others withered. People didn't vanish. They moved, started new towns, blended with other cultures, or melted into the countryside. The Maya are still here, their descendants living, farming, speaking languages older than the ruins. The cities are gone, but the people endured, stubborn as ever. You pick your way over a fallen lintel, careful not to twist your ankle on the uneven stones. Sometimes archaeologists dig up an entire city and find the strangest things left behind. A half-carved statue, a room full of pots, or famously a staircase with a single sandal. Did its owner hop away, or did someone just really hate shoes? These little mysteries add up, and you realize history isn't about answers, it's about questions. The endless, wonderful, sometimes ridiculous questions. As dawn begins to thin the shadows, you look back one last time. The pyramids glow faintly, their outlines softened by the morning mist. If you listen, the jungle still breathes deep, steady, forever. You let the silence fill you, not with sadness, but with a kind of awe. Everything that vanishes leaves something behind, a story, a lesson, a warning, or just the stubborn hope that someone, someday will remember. And tonight you have remembered. Stepping away from the ruins, you let yourself smile at how the world turns, how cities rise, shine, and then quietly bow out, leaving the stage for moss, monkeys, and moonlight. You promise to carry these whispers with you at least until breakfast, and as the last firefly blinks out, you know the Mayan world is never truly gone. It just waits, quiet and green, for curious hearts to come listening. You blink and the jungle haze softens, shifting into the hot, dry gold of the American Southwest. Your feet crunch on gravel, and the air is so clear it feels almost sharp in your lungs. You're standing on the edge of a mesa, wind tugging at your clothes, looking out over a canyon so wide and silent it makes your bones feel hollow. Down below, tucked into the honey-colored cliffs, you spot something uncanny. Entire cities built right into the stone, impossible, magical, and now utterly deserted. Tonight you're a midnight wanderer among the ancestral Puebloans, sometimes called the Anasazi, and you're walking where thousands lived and vanished, their story lingering in the wind and the careful chisel marks in the cliff. The first thing you notice is the quiet. It's a different quiet than the jungle's dense hush or Roanoke's misty absence. This is a clean, ringing silence, bright and ancient, humming with the memories of lives once so tightly woven together that it seems impossible they could ever unravel. The cliff dwellings are right there in front of you, great stone villages tucked beneath overhangs, rooms upon rooms stacked and clustered, like a honeycomb or a child's block castle taken to extremes. You stand at the rim and look down, and if you listen, you can almost hear the murmur of conversation, the slap of sandals, the creak of ladders. With every step, you're invited deeper into the story. Sunlight splashes over walls that still hold the warmth of long-gone afternoons. You wander through tiny doorways, rooms no bigger than your kitchen, soot still blackening the ceilings from ancient fires. The floors are swept clean by time and wind, but here and there you spot small treasures, a corncob, black and shriveled but still stubbornly holding on, a fragment of pottery painted with dizzying, hypnotic patterns, a stone axe head, heavier than you'd expect, worn smooth by countless cureless hands. Pause and look up. There are finger smudges of red and yellow ochre, faint pictographs dancing along the ceiling. Stick figures chase deer. Spirals twirl inward, as if promising secrets to anyone with patience enough to listen. You trace the outline of a handprint. Someone pressed their palm here 1,000 years ago, and suddenly across all the centuries, you can feel the weight of their hope, their ordinary, extraordinary life. These cities in the cliffs weren't just for show. They were a masterclass in resilience, engineering, and community. The ancestral Puebloans carved and stacked, planned and adapted, fitting their homes to the land with a kind of stubborn grace. It wasn't easy. Water was precious, the sun relentless, and the world beyond the canyon rim full of both possibility and threat. Yet for centuries, these cliff palaces bustled with families, children giggling in the cool shadows, elders grinding corn, whole communities gathering to share food, stories, and the latest news about whose turkey ran away again. Some problems are timeless. But then, slowly, the laughter faded. By the end of the 13th century, these great cities, Mesa Verde, Chaco Canyon, Betataki, were left empty, ladders hauled up, doorways sealed, fire pits cold. It's a vanishing so complete that even the crows seem to fly a little softer here. You kneel by a kiva, a ceremonial room sunk deep into the earth, round as a full moon. Imagine the voices echoing within, prayers, debates, maybe a few jokes at the expense of rival clans. The kiva's roof has collapsed, but the spirit of community lingers, as if the stones themselves are waiting for one last story. You run your fingers along the masonry, marveling at how tightly the stones fit, no mortar needed, each one patiently chosen and placed. The care is palpable, as if every wall is a love letter to the land. So what happened? Why did everyone leave? You close your eyes and listen for the answers, but the wind just whistles through the empty rooms. Theories swirl as thick as desert dust. Drought so severe even the stubborn pinyon trees withered, crop failures and famine gnawing at bellies and hope. Social tensions rising perhaps as neighbors squabbled over the last muddy trickle of water. Or maybe there were new opportunities elsewhere. Greener valleys, safer homes, alliances to be made far from the exposed cliffs. Like the Maya, the ancestral Pueblans didn't disappear all at once. Some drifted away gradually, families peeling off like flakes from old paint, carrying their traditions into new communities, new chapters. The landscape remembers, even if the details are lost. You find a shard of pottery in the dust, turning it over in your hand. Maybe it was part of a treasured bowl, the kind used only for feasts. Or maybe it was the everyday dish, the one with a little chip in the rim that someone grumbled about but never bothered to fix. You can almost see the argument, one partner insisting it's fine, the other vowing to make a new one soon. Even in vanished cities, the little annoyances persist, echoing through time like a cosmic inside joke. You climb a wooden ladder, old, splintered, and creaky, and you silently hope your travel insurance covers time travel accidents. Up above, the rooms grow narrower, cool, and shadowed. You peek through a slit of a window, the world outside blazing with sunlight so bright you have to squint once. This was a lookout. Someone kept watch, scanning for travelers, wild animals, or the distant flicker of a rival village's signal fire. Now, the only movement is the lazy drift of a lizard sunbathing on a stone. Everywhere you turn, you see the marks of daily life, the grindstones worn deep from years of cornmeal, the post holes where beams once stood, the delicate impressions of sandals in ancient plaster. Some rooms feel so personal you half expect to find a half-finished chore, a forgotten basket, a scrap of weaving, a toy made from corn husks. You realize with a gentle pang that for all their ingenuity, the people who lived here weren't so different from you. They worried about rain, argued about chores, celebrated the return of the sun, and sometimes just needed a quiet moment away from everyone else. Out on a narrow ledge, you pause to take in the view. The whole world seems to open up. Red rock, blue sky, a hawk circling in the distance. It's a view worth fighting for, and maybe that's why these cities lasted as long as they did. But beauty alone can't guarantee survival. The rains grew fickle, the game scarcer, and perhaps the world just shifted beneath their feet, forcing families to move on before the land could turn against them completely. As dusk falls, the stone glows gold, then fades to violet and shadow. You sit on the edge, feet dangling over centuries of dust and memory, and let the stories drift around you. Did the last people to leave these cities know they were closing a chapter? Did they look back, hearts heavy, or did they hurry on, anxious for whatever waited over the next rise? Did they promise to return, or did they simply trust that the land would remember them long after their footprints were gone? Night settles softly, and you find yourself inside one of the rooms, curled up where someone once slept. The air is cool and dry, the silence deep enough to almost hear your own thoughts. You imagine the city full of life, fires crackling, voices rising in song, someone muttering about burnt supper. In the quiet you feel the weight of time, gentle and persistent, pressing everything down until all that's left are stones, stories, and the stubborn hope that someone, someday, will listen. You slip outside again, and for a moment, you see lights flickering in the distant desert. Maybe another city still alive, or maybe just your imagination, painting the darkness with memory and longing. The stars come out in a rush, sharp and cold and brilliant. Somewhere out there, descendants of the ancestral Puebloans still walk, still sing the old songs, still remember the stories handed down in kitchens and kivas and quiet conversations. You run your hands along the stones one last time, grateful for their patience. The cities in the cliffs may be empty, but they are not forgotten. Every vanished home, every echoing kiva, is a reminder that what seems permanent can slip away, and that's all the more reason to cherish the ordinary moments, to hold your own stories close, and maybe to leave a handprint or two behind, just in case someone comes looking in 1,000 years. The moon climbs higher, silvering the rocks, and you begin to move on. Your shadow drifts across the sand, long and thin. Behind you, the cliffs stand silent, holding their secrets. Ahead, the world waits, full of more mysteries, more stories, and if you're lucky, a little less climbing. And as you wander away from the cliff cities, the wind picks up, carrying with it the voices of those who came before, not lost, just waiting for you to listen, to remember, and to carry their story forward into the night. You take a slow, deep breath, and the landscape changes beneath your feet once again. Dust and stone fade, giving way to the damp hush of the Midwest, a world not of cliffs or jungles, but of vast open plains where the sky seems to go on forever. Here, beneath the grass and wildflowers, lies the shadow of another lost city, Cahokia. You might have heard the name in passing, maybe glimpsed a picture of mysterious earthen mounds rising up from the Illinois soil, like the backs of ancient turtles. But tonight, you're not just passing by, you're standing in the middle of North America's forgotten metropolis, the closest thing the continent ever had to an ancient capital. A city whose scale could swallow whole towns, whose silence now rings with mysteries every bit as haunting as the lost worlds you've visited so far. It's funny, the word city conjures up images of steel and glass, honking cars and blinking lights, but Cahokia was all about the earth. Imagine a place as busy and complex as any modern city, but without a single skyscraper or traffic light. Instead, you're surrounded by rolling green mounds, some as tall as 10-story buildings, arranged with astonishing precision. Once more than 20,000 people lived here, maybe as many as 40,000 at its peak, making Cahokia bigger than London was in the year 1200. That's a lot of neighbours for a place most people today couldn't find on a map. You wander up the long slope of Monk's Mound, the city's centrepiece. Each step lifts you higher above the fields, and with every footfall, you feel the weight of 1,000 years pressing up through the soles of your shoes. The mound is massive, nearly 100 feet tall, hundreds of feet wide, made from millions of baskets of dirt painstakingly hauled by hand. You can't help but imagine the workers trudging up and down, sweating in the sticky summer heat, all for a city that in its day was the beating heart of a civilization. At the top you pause to catch your breath. The wind is gentle but insistent, tugging at your clothes, swirling through the grasses that now grow where wooden temples and grand houses once stood. Look around. To the north, a line of mounds marking the city's boundaries. To the east, a reconstructed wooden woodhenge, a massive circle of posts once used to track the sun and mark the seasons. It's part calendar, part sacred space, part local tourist trap for anyone with a passion for standing in circles. The sun is setting, throwing long shadows across the land. You can almost see the bustle: traders and priests, farmers and craftsmen, children running between houses made of wattle and daub. Cahokia wasn't just big, it was organized. Neighborhoods sprawled out in every direction, connected by wide, well-trodden paths. There were marketplaces full of clamor and color, workshops for everything from pottery to jewelry, granaries overflowing with corn. If you close your eyes, you might hear the calls of hawkers, the clang of stone tools, the sweet, sticky laughter of families gathering for feasts. At its height, Cahokia was a hub, pulling in goods and ideas from across the continent. Shells from the Gulf Coast, copper from the Great Lakes, obsidian from the Rockies. Here the world came together, and the city thrived. Yet, for all its scale and sophistication, Cahokia faded quickly, mysteriously. By the late 1300s, the city was almost empty. No one knows exactly why. Theories pile up, each one more complicated than the last. Maybe it was overpopulation, the land worn out by too many crops, too little rest. Maybe it was climate change, a series of floods, then droughts that made the fields impossible to farm. Some say disease snuck in along the trade routes, thinning the city's crowds. Others whisper about war, social upheaval, or just the slow pull of people drifting away, one family at a time, until only the mounds remained. As you walk back down the mound, you try to picture what the last days looked like. Was there panic, or just resignation? Did families huddle in their houses, telling old stories, hoping the floods would recede or the crops would grow again? Or did they simply pack up and leave, slipping away quietly into the woods and river valleys, leaving behind only the bones of their city for the grass to reclaim? You wander through the shadows at the base of the mound, where smaller mounds dot the landscape, burial mounds, platform mounds, markers for forgotten ceremonies. Some are still perfectly shaped, their sides as crisp as if someone came out each morning with a giant rake. Others have softened, slumping into the earth like tired shoulders. The city is gone, but the earth remembers every story, every step. You pause at a small, lonely mound and lay your hand on the grass, feeling for a heartbeat. If you listen, you can almost hear it, slow, steady, stubborn. As night creeps in, The fields take on a dreamlike quality. Fireflies blink among the grasses, and the hum of insects rises in a sleepy chorus. You pass what used to be a grand plaza, now just an empty stretch of grass. But once the beating heart of the city, here people gathered for ceremonies and games, feasts and arguments. The air is thick with memory. You spot a piece of broken pottery, its painted design still visible under the dirt, and wonder who held it last. Was it a child, sneaking a snack? An elder, lost in thought? Or maybe it was just someone like you, pausing to rest for a moment, not knowing they stood at the edge of history. The world of Cahokia was more than just mounds and markets. It was full of art, music, and faith. The people built temples that reached toward the sky, held festivals that lasted for days, and worshipped a universe alive with spirits. You picture the sun rising on a day of celebration, drums echoing across the fields, dancers moving in bright feathers, the smell of roasting corn drifting through the air. It's a scene as vivid as any modern parade, and for a moment you feel the press of the crowd, the excitement of 1,000 voices joined in hope. But even the best parties must end. The city's fall was not marked by a single tragedy, but by 1,000 small losses, a failed harvest here, a sickness there, the slow fraying of the bonds that held everyone together. Maybe people quarreled, maybe they lost faith in their leaders, or maybe the world just changed faster than they could adapt. It's the oldest story in the world. A place flourishes, then falters, and finally life moves on. As you wander the quiet fields, you're struck by how little remains, and how much. The mounds rise out of the dark, steady as the stars. The grass is thick, but the paths are still there, faint and stubborn, leading off into the unknown. You realize that the city's true legacy isn't in the dirt or the broken pottery, but in the way its story echoes through time. Every vanished city leaves something behind. And Cahokia's gift is the reminder that greatness can bloom anywhere, quietly, unexpectedly, and sometimes just for a little while. You settle down at the edge of the plaza, watching the fireflies blink in the dark. The air is cool, and the world feels wide open. For a moment you let yourself imagine what it would be like to live here, to wake each morning to the sight of mounds rising out of the mist, to walk the crowded streets, to trade stories with friends from far-off places. You feel the weight of time pressing gently all around you, not as a burden but as a comfort, the sense that you're never really alone, that every place you walk is layered with memories and meaning. A soft breeze rustles the grass, and somewhere in the distance you hear the low call of an owl. You stand, brushing the dirt from your hands, and take one last look at the mounds. They're quiet now, but not empty. The city may have vanished, but its story is still being told, one whisper at a time, whenever someone pauses to listen, to wonder or to dream. You walk away slowly, the prairie stretching out before you, stars scattered overhead like 1,000 ancient fires. Cahokia fades behind you, but you carry its memory with you, a reminder that cities may disappear but their echoes linger, shaping the world in ways we're only just beginning to understand. You keep walking, the echoes of Cahokia's silent mounds fading behind you, and the air changes once more. The thick, sleepy hush of the North American prairie slips away, replaced by an embrace of living green, so dense and tangled it almost hums, a world where sunlight filters through a ceiling of leaves and the ground is as soft as memory itself. You're deep in the Amazon now, far south of the lands you've crossed, and for a moment it feels as if the forest is breathing with you, rising and falling, every leaf and root a secret waiting to be unearthed. Here you are surrounded by life so overwhelming that for centuries no one believed entire cities could exist beneath its shadowy canopy. But cities did exist here, great ones, so many, so old, that their stories are only now beginning to emerge from beneath centuries of green. You step carefully, brushing aside a branch, feeling the warm breath of the forest on your neck. 1,000 insects sing their midnight song. Somewhere close, a troop of monkeys bickers, and the hush is punctuated by the distant, strange roar of a jaguar. You're not alone. But that's always been true in this place. The idea that the Amazon was empty, pristine, an untouched garden is as persistent as the vines curling around your feet. For a long time, people thought the jungle itself was too wild, too unforgiving, to allow for real cities. But the truth, one the trees have been keeping very close, is that long before Columbus ever glimpsed the Caribbean, the Amazon hosted entire civilization, vast networks of villages, roads, and ceremonial mounds sprawled beneath the forest roof, home to hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people. It's hard to see it, even when you know. You step over roots, the ground springy with centuries of leaf litter, but then you notice the subtle, unnatural straightness of an ancient road, now barely more than a low ridge, running arrow straight for miles, or a sudden, gentle swell in the earth, a mound once topped with a house or a temple. If you had a bird's eye view, you'd see the outlines of plazas, moats, canals, even geometric earthworks in circles and squares. The patterns are everywhere, hidden just beneath the green, like faint memories under the surface of a dream. Pause for a moment and listen. What sounds like the forest's random chaos is in truth built on a foundation of intention. The people who lived here, descendants of cultures as rich as any in the world, shaped the land itself. They planted dark earth, enriching the soil with charcoal and kitchen scraps, creating patches that remain fertile after 1,000 years. They built fish ponds and causeways, drew lines of palms and fruit trees across the landscape. The forest is not just wild, it is, in a deep sense, a garden, an ancient city overgrown but never truly erased. You wander through this leafy world, trying to imagine it in its prime. The air would have rung with the sound of axes on wood, laughter and singing, the hum of commerce and ritual. Picture children splashing in a canal, artisans firing clay figures, traders arriving from distant rivers with baskets of salt, feathers, or dazzling blue stones. The air might have smelled of roasting fish, sweet fruit, the tang of smoke from cooking fires. Archaeologists only began to truly understand the Amazon's buried cities in the last few decades. Technology like LiDAR, a kind of laser X-ray vision from the sky, revealed the unmistakable outlines of vast settlements, sometimes in perfect geometric patterns, under the trees. Ancient roads cut straight through miles of tangled jungle, testifying to the ambition and skill of people whose names are mostly lost to time. Imagine building a city where your main competition isn't the next kingdom over, but a relentless, ever-hungry forest. You'd have to be clever, adaptable, and maybe a little stubborn, just the kind of people who leave the best stories behind. But of course, these cities didn't last forever. Even as the people of Cahokia watched their city fade, so too did the people of the Amazon begin to vanish, their worlds slowly overtaken by green. You ask yourself why? The answers, as always, are many and tangled. Some say it was disease, the same waves of smallpox and measles that swept through the Americas after the arrival of Europeans, silent and deadly, moving faster than any explorer could travel. Some say climate change played a part, the cycle of floods and droughts turning lush gardens into traps. Others whisper about wars, migration, the collapse of fragile alliances that once held communities together. And then, perhaps most powerful of all, was the jungle itself. It is always hungry, always reaching. Let a city slip for even a generation, and vines will swallow plazas, roots will lift stone, trees will split houses and temples alike. In time, the forest erases all but the faintest hints. A ditch here, a mound there, a scatter of pottery lost in the tangled undergrowth. But listen closely. Even as the jungle reclaims the world, it preserves as well. The cities are hidden, not destroyed. The stories sleep, but they are not gone. You find a tree, huge and ancient, growing atop what must have been a ceremonial platform. The roots curl down through what was once a floor. You sit for a moment, letting the hush settle in. If you close your eyes, you might hear the echo of drums, the chants of priests, the laughter of families gathering at dusk. You might even imagine the city reawakening, if only for a heartbeat, light flickering in 1,000 windows, the forest held at bay, at least for one more night. There's something almost hopeful in the way these places disappear. They don't explode in a moment of violence or catastrophe. Instead, they are gently reclaimed by the living world, wrapped up in green and shadow, waiting for curious feet and careful hands to rediscover them. The forest is patient. It has time to spare. You stand again, brushing dirt from your hands. At your feet, a piece of black pottery catches the light, burnished and strong. It outlasted the house it once lived in, the hands that shaped it, the world that needed it. You think about all the objects hidden just beneath the soil, waiting to be found. Arrowheads, beads, bits of bone and shell. The forest is not empty, it's crowded with memory. As you walk, the moon slides overhead, sending stripes of silver through the trees. The shadows shift and twist. A howler monkey shrieks somewhere nearby, startling you, proof that even in a vanished city, you're not quite alone. You laugh softly, a little embarrassed, and keep walking. Suddenly, the forest opens, and you find yourself at the edge of a vast, silent lake. The water is as smooth as glass, reflecting the tangled canopy above. This too was shaped by human hands, an artificial pond perhaps used for fish farming or ritual. Its banks built up by centuries of care. The frogs are singing, and fireflies blink at the edge of vision. You crouch and touch the water, cool and clean. Imagine hundreds of years ago, children splashing, old women gossiping at the water's edge, boys showing off their best dives, all of them watched by the spirits of the jungle, amused and patient. All around you, the signs of old cities linger. You pass what looks like just another low ridge, but if you dig, you'd find it's the remnants of a wall, maybe a house foundation. Further on, a stand of Brazil nut trees, too many, too regular to be wild, marks the spot where a garden once flourished, feeding generations. Each step you take is a step on a forgotten path, a line drawn by people who knew this world as intimately as you know the streets of your own neighborhood. The most astonishing thing? The people who built these cities are not gone. Their descendants live all through the Amazon, farming, fishing, keeping the forest alive in ways that would put most city dwellers to shame. Their languages and stories echo in the names of rivers, in the rhythm of daily life. The forest is not just a tomb, it's a living library if you know how to read it. As dawn brightens, you pause on a low mound, watching the first light slip through the trees. The air smells of earth and water, and for a moment the city is alive again, just at the edge of vision, just out of reach. You promise yourself that you'll remember, that you'll tell the story that beneath the trees, whole worlds sleep, waiting for gentle hands and patient hearts to find them again. You walk on, heart full of green, and the vanished cities of the Amazon walk with you, quiet, watchful, never truly lost. The green hush of the Amazon gently fades as you move forward, and with it goes the comforting knowledge of thriving worlds hidden by time rather than erased outright. Now the air chills a little, and a deeper unease settles in your chest, because you are stepping into a story where the enemy cannot be seen, heard, or touched. Not a jaguar, not a warlord, but a ghostly army that swept through the Americas long before most Europeans ever set foot on its soil. Tonight you're walking into the silence left behind by disease, silence so deep and vast it swallowed entire cities, towns, and peoples without a sound. Imagine the Americas before 1492, villages and cities, as busy and complex as any in the Old World. Empires stretched across forests, mountains, and rivers. Farmers bent to their fields, markets buzzed, priests watched the sky, rulers plotted alliances. It's hard to picture now, but population estimates for the Americas before European arrival reach as high as 60 or even 100 million people. That's more than lived in all of Europe at the time. Great cities pulsed with life. Tenochtitlan, with its floating gardens and busy causeways, Cuzco, the Inca capital, nestled in the Andes, Cahokia's mounds, the vast networks beneath the Amazon. It was a world as rich, messy, and ambitious as any that came before or after. But then, without warning, the world began to empty. You stand on the edge of a road outside an ancient town. The path is wide, stone-lined, built for the tread of thousands of feet every day. Now weeds push through the cracks, and the only footprints belong to foxes and birds. The silence is so total, it makes your ears ring. You feel it in your bones. Something immense is missing. And here is the hardest truth. Entire cities disappeared, not because of war, fire, or famine, but because of diseases that arrived silently, hitchhiking in the breath and blood of strangers. Smallpox, measles, influenza, and more names that sound almost ordinary today, were the horsemen of apocalypse for the people of the Americas. These illnesses swept ahead of European explorers and conquerors, moving faster than ships, crossing mountain ranges and rivers, leaping from village to village. In many cases, no European had yet been seen, but the invisible killer was already at work. You walk through a vanished neighborhood, trying to imagine what it must have been like, waking one morning to find neighbors sick, then your own family, then yourself. You might pray to your gods, call on healers, offer gifts or sacrifices, but nothing works. People weaken, then fall, then vanish. The fields go untended, the markets are silent, ceremonies stop. Within months, sometimes within weeks, a community that took centuries to build is reduced to a handful of survivors, if any at all. The stories come down through generations, whispered and half-remembered. In some places, the survivors set fire to their own villages, fearing spirits or contagion, and fled into the wild. In others, children were left orphaned, wandering the forests, taken in by other tribes or perishing in silence. Some people believed they were cursed, or that their gods had turned away. Others saw the disease as a mysterious, unstoppable force, beyond even the power of their greatest shamans. Imagine the heartbreak, the confusion, the fear. Even the most resilient community could not hold out against an enemy so merciless and unseen. You pause beside what was once a grand plaza, now only a patch of grass and broken stone. You imagine it full of people laughing, arguing, dancing, celebrating. Now, only the wind stirs the dust. You can almost hear the echo of feet, the distant thrum of drums, but when you turn, there's no one there. It's the loneliest feeling in the world, knowing that a city once stood here bursting with life, and now there is only emptiness. The numbers are almost impossible to grasp. Some regions lost up to 90% of their people within a single generation. Whole languages vanished, family lines ended, knowledge lost forever. Cities became haunted places, shunned or forgotten by those who survived. Some towns collapsed so completely that their ruins were swallowed by jungle or prairie, lost even to memory. And yet in the aftermath, new stories began. The survivors were not just victims, they were also creators of new worlds, new cultures, new families. Some moved away seeking safer ground, blending with neighbors, adopting new traditions. Others stayed, keeping watch over the bones of old cities, tending memories as carefully as crops. Some tried to rebuild, planting gardens where plazas once stood, holding on to rituals as a way to stitch the world back together. Loss and resilience walk hand in hand across these abandoned landscapes. You sit beside a ruined wall and let the weight of history press down. It would be easy to see only tragedy here, but you notice a sapling growing in the cracks, a reminder that life returns, even after the worst has happened. Maybe it's not the same life as before, maybe the language is different, the stories have changed. The old gods are gone, but something always persists. You think too about how disease shapes the world in ways we rarely notice. After the great epidemics, new animals appeared where people once farmed. Forests grew back over fields, rivers shifted. Even the climate changed. In some places, the sudden emptiness lured explorers and settlers who marveled at the untouched wilderness, never realizing they walked among the ruins of the recently departed. The Americas seen by later Europeans were not a new world, but a world still echoing with loss. And yet, The vanished cities are not gone entirely. They live on in the memory of those who came after, in stories, songs, half-forgotten rituals, and stubborn ruins peeking from the grass. The shape of old roads, the pattern of fields, the names of rivers, all are traces of lives once lived, hopes once cherished. You rise and walk on, the night cooler now. You cross what was once a bridge, now only a tumble of stones in a slow-moving stream. The water reflects the stars, silent and patient. Somewhere an owl calls, a lonely sound, but not despairing. You realize, perhaps for the first time, that every city, every civilization is only ever a heartbeat away from vanishing. All it takes is a change in the wind, a sickness, a silence. But as you keep walking, the world grows softer, less haunted. You see signs of return, plants reclaiming plazas, animals nesting in old homes, new villages rising on the bones of the old. You think of all the ways people adapt, stubborn and creative, always finding new ways to live. Even in the face of loss, life insists on itself. You pause, letting the silence settle in. There is beauty in remembering, even when the memories are hard. You promise, quietly, to remember the vanished cities, to honor the people who built them and the ones who survived, to know that, even in silence, there is a story waiting to be told. And as dawn comes, the first birds begin to sing. The world is never quite empty, never truly silent. There are always echoes, always new stories waiting to begin. You step away from the silent devastation left by invisible invaders, and almost without noticing, the world shifts beneath your feet again. The jungle is gone, the fever dream of disease fades into memory, and now you are standing in a land where the weather itself has teeth. All around, the ground is hard, cracked, or churned by rain, and the sky looms heavy, sometimes blue and sharp, sometimes bruised with the threat of storms. Tonight you are walking into the harsh reality of climate chaos, where the very elements with a shrug or a snarl can unmake the greatest cities overnight or grind them down through the slow, merciless patience of centuries. You can almost feel it in your bones, that ancient anxious hope for good weather, for regular rains, for seasons that don't betray you, because it's easy to think of cities as permanent, as monuments to human willpower, but the truth is, all civilization is built on the shaky ground of climate. A year or two of bad luck, and even the greatest city can falter. A decade or two and it can vanish, leaving only broken walls, dry wells, and a question mark for every historian that follows. You begin your nights wandering in the shadow of a great, vanished pyramid, let's say in the Yucatan, among the Maya again. But tonight the setting stands in for dozens of lost cities, from Arizona to Peru. The stone is cool beneath your palm. Insects sing in the long grass, but there's a tension here, the ghost of an ancient fear. The stories say the rains began to fail. First a bad harvest, then another, and soon the canals that once shimmered with water are nothing but dry ditches, the fields brittle and silent. You imagine a family, a mother watching the sky, counting clouds, hoping for the relief of rain. A father digging deeper wells, building new canals, calculating how long the stored maize will last. Children learning the taste of hunger, watching as neighbors pack up and disappear into the forest, seeking luck elsewhere. The city's rulers call for more ceremonies, more sacrifices, more prayers to gods whose patience, it seems, has run thin. Priests study the stars, searching for omens, reading the heavens for signs of mercy. But the sky is implacable. Storms refuse to come, or worse, when the rains do arrive, they come all at once, flooding fields, washing away precious topsoil, flattening crops. Rivers that once promised life now threaten destruction, carving new channels, drowning villages in mud. You realize, with a little shiver, that the only constant in the ancient world was change, and not the friendly kind. You keep walking, and the scene changes. You're in the southwest now, where the ancestral Puebloans watch the monsoon clouds with equal parts hope and dread. Their cliff dwellings, tucked into stone for safety, are now ghostly reminders of what once was. For a few centuries the rains came as needed. The people flourished, building great houses, creating intricate networks of roads and canals, storing corn for lean times. But then came decades of drought, some so severe they left tree rings shrunken and twisted, the rivers running low, and the reservoirs drying to dust. The people tried everything: new farming methods, moving fields, digging deeper, but in the end, the land gave no quarter. Villages emptied. Families moved on, searching for a place where water still flowed, where corn might still grow, where the gods might be kinder. You pause at a dried-up reservoir, its stone sides still stained with the memory of water. Someone long ago painted a line to mark a hopeful water level. Below it the stone is pale and cracked. You imagine the frustration of that moment. Every day, watching the line of hope grow further out of reach. Every night, listening to elders mutter about the old days when the rain always came. It wasn't just the Americas. Climate chaos has been a villain in the story of every civilization. But here, without horses or the wheel, communities relied on their wits, their communal strength, and their ability to read the land. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it was not enough. In South America, the fate of the Mache, and later the Chimu, along the northern coast of Peru, is a story written by El Niño, the strange warming of the Pacific that can bring disastrous floods, then crippling droughts. The Mache built cities with huge ceremonial pyramids, intricate irrigation networks, and vast fields. For centuries they tamed the desert. Then, when El Niño turned cruel, the rays came too strong, washing away fields and roads, destroying crops and homes. Then came the dry years, when even the rivers shrank and the land cracked open. The people persisted as long as they could, but in the end, many of their cities faded, the survivors forced to scatter or start anew. You think of how closely tied ancient lives were to nature's moods. Weathermen and apps didn't exist. Your future was written in the sky, in the river's rise and fall, in the pattern of clouds, the migration of birds. To be human was to hope, to guess, to worry, and to adapt. You keep moving, feeling the cold press of uncertainty at your back. You picture the collapse not as a sudden disaster, but as a slow, grinding erosion. First, the fields that don't yield. Next, the animals that grow thin. Finally, the houses that are abandoned. One by one, entire districts fall silent. The laughter of markets grows sparse, then dies out altogether. In the end, only the wind and a handful of stubborn plants remain. In some places, the climate's betrayal left not just hunger, but fear. The people of Teotihuacan, the greatest city in the Americas at its height, home to perhaps 100,000 souls, built their lives around the predictability of the Valley of Mexico's seasons. But when the rains became irregular and the droughts harsher, the city's delicate web began to unravel. Some say the city's rulers lost their grip, unable to promise the future. Unrest simmered, alliances broke, and the great avenues that once bustled with trade and ceremony slowly emptied. You crouch in the shadow of a toppled temple, and for a moment you sense what it must have been like to live through those times. Every year, hope withered a little more. Every season, a few more neighbors disappeared. It's not hard to see why stories of angry gods or lost blessings became so powerful. When the world turns against you, you reach for explanations, any explanation to hold off despair. And yet, in the face of all this, people didn't simply vanish overnight. They resisted, adapted, and clung to hope longer than you might expect. They experimented with new seeds, new rituals, new alliances. Sometimes it worked, and new cities sprang up where the old ones fell. Sometimes the only answer was to leave, to scatter and try again somewhere else. Migration was not failure, but a kind of faith in the future, a belief that life could start anew, if only you could find the right place. You rise and walk along the remnants of an ancient road, straight as a promise, vanishing into the haze. The stones are warm under your feet, Once caravans loaded with maize, salt, obsidian, and bright feathers would have passed this way, the air alive with gossip and the shouts of traders. Now, only your footsteps and the whisper of the wind remain. As the night deepens, you let yourself feel the weight and wonder of it all. The climate that feeds can also starve. The rains that nourish can also destroy. Cities are always at the mercy of the sky, no matter how high they build or how carefully they plan. But here's the other truth. People have always found ways to endure, to adapt, to carry their stories forward. Even as cities vanish, their spirit lingers in new fields, new villages, new songs. Hope is as stubborn as drought, as tenacious as flood. You pause at the edge of a dry field, where new grass pokes up through the cracked earth. Somewhere far off you hear the rumble of thunder, the promise of rain, or maybe just another storm on the horizon. You let the sound fill you, a reminder that nothing is certain, nothing is forever, and yet for as long as there have been cities, there have been people willing to rebuild, to risk it all for one more harvest, one more sunrise, one more chance to belong. You walk on, the stars spinning overhead, and know that while climate chaos can silence a city, it cannot silence hope. In every vanished place you find the trace of someone who dared to start again, to believe that the world would be kind, at least for a little while. And as you leave the field behind, you carry that stubborn hope with you, a light against the darkness, a promise that every ending contains the seeds of a new beginning. You leave behind the moody fields and abandoned canals, your mind full of thunderclouds and parched riverbeds, and find yourself slipping into another kind of storm, the storm of people. Tonight you walk into the aftermath of war and collapse, where the greatest danger wasn't always the sky or the soil, but the unpredictable hearts and hungers of your fellow humans. Here in the dark corridors of lost cities, you sense the pulse of conflict, betrayal, fear, and desperate hope. War is ancient, and every city, no matter how high its walls or how clever its priests, has lived with the threat of invasion, rebellion, or civil strife. You step softly along the broken stones of an old fortress. Let's call it a place like Tiwanaku in the high Andes, or Tula in central Mexico, or any of 1,000 cities now reduced to haunted plazas and crumbling towers. Once these walls rang with the tramp of armies and the shouts of defenders. Now, only the wind moves through the empty gates. You pause in what was once a bustling square. There are scorch marks on the stone, black stains from ancient fires. Pottery shards crunch under your boots, and here and there you find the remains of arrowheads, spear tips, broken blades, a whole lost arsenal scattered and forgotten. You realize with a start that every war, every battle leaves its scars, not only on people, but on the very places they called home. You imagine the scene at its height, the city in turmoil, alarms ringing out at dawn or dusk, families grabbing what they can and rushing for shelter. Archers take positions on rooftops while elders and children huddle in the dark, praying for mercy. At the city's edge, defenders steel themselves for the enemy's approach, watching the horizon for dust, listening for the terrible drumbeat of feet or hooves. Sometimes the enemy came from far away, a kingdom hungry for land or tribute. Sometimes the threat was closer to home, a rival clan, a rebellious noble, a splinter group dissatisfied with how things were run. And sometimes the collapse came from within, as neighbors who once shared bread and laughter found themselves on opposite sides of an argument that grew sharper and darker with every passing season. You climb a shattered stairway, the stones uneven, worn by centuries of rain and regret. At the top, you find what might have been a council chamber, its roof long gone, the walls etched with faded graffiti names. Maybe, or curses, or just the idle doodles of someone waiting for the meeting to end. You smile at the thought. Some things never change. The war stories of the Americas are rarely simple. In the Maya world, alliances shifted like sand, and cities that were friends one year could be bitter rivals the next. Captured kings were paraded in humiliation, sometimes sacrificed, their defeat carved in stone for all to see. In other places, long droughts or hard times could make neighbors into enemies, as everyone scrambled for what little remained. The stories of Teotihuacan, Tula, and countless others tell the same tale. Great cities weakened by hunger or doubt, made vulnerable to attack, and when the end came, it often came not as a single, glorious battle, but as years, sometimes generations of violence, fear, and decline. You picture a city under siege. Food runs short, tempers flare. Night after night, the defenders listen for the sound of axes at the gate. Children grow silent. Elders try to keep hope alive with old songs and stories. Maybe there are traitors, secret negotiations, desperate bargains. The days stretch into weeks, then months. Eventually the city falls, not always with a bang, but sometimes with a whisper. A gate opened at midnight, a last stand in the plaza, a handful of survivors slipping away through hidden passages. After the fall, what comes is even stranger. The conquerors might move in, rebuilding or erasing what came before. Or the city might be abandoned altogether, left to the weeds and the ghosts. In some places, the victors imposed new languages, new gods, new ways of life. In others, they simply looted and left, the city's heart ripped out, but the bones still lying on the land. Either way, the places where people once lived and loved become stage sets for silence. You wander into what was once a palace, now only low walls and tumbled pillars. The floors are littered with the detritus of hurried flight, broken pots, a spindle whirl, half a painted mask. You imagine the last days, people packing their treasures, arguing about what to take and what to leave, a favorite cup, a family idol, a child's toy. Maybe someone buried a secret stash, hoping to return when peace was restored. Maybe those secrets are still there, waiting for an archaeologist or a lucky wanderer like you to uncover them. As you sit, the night grows colder, and you're struck by how war and collapse echo through time. Sometimes the cause is forgotten, but the results linger. A broken wall, a burned roof, a rumor passed down for generations. Even centuries later, when people return to these ruins, they find the old wounds still tender, places avoided, stories left unfinished, names whispered only at night. But not all is loss. Even in the aftermath of war, there is renewal. Survivors carry memories, lessons, and often a stubborn desire to rebuild. Some move far away, starting fresh. Others remain, turning ruins into new homes, patching up walls, planting gardens where the old courtyards stood. In time, the scars fade, and what was once a battlefield becomes a playground, a market, a place for festivals and laughter. You think of the Inca, whose empire felt a civil war before the Spanish ever arrived, a bitter struggle between two royal brothers, their armies tearing the land apart. When the Europeans finally marched in, they found not a united kingdom, but a world already reeling, uncertain, ready to fall. In the north, the Mississippian world unraveled under the weight of internal strife and power struggles. As cities like Cahokia splintered into factions and villages, the old unity lost forever. You walk along the city's edge, where old watchtowers crumble against the sky. The land beyond is wild now, but once it was carefully tended. Fields, orchards, sacred groves, you see the faint outlines still, the stubborn green where roots go deeper than memory. Life persists, even after the worst. As dawn approaches, you hear birds stirring in the ruins. Their song is soft but determined, echoing through the empty streets. It's a reminder that the world moves on, even after war and collapse. The cities may be gone, but the land endures, carrying both scars and seeds for the future. You stop and rest beside a toppled statue, the features worn away, the identity lost. Was this a king, a god, a beloved ancestor? Now it is only stone, but in your imagination it comes alive again, part of the great tapestry of stories that bind the past to the present. Before you go, you offer a silent thought for all those who lived through war. who held their families close, who rebuilt and remembered. For every city that fell, there are countless stories of courage, resilience, and hope. You promise to carry those stories forward, to remember that every ruin was once alive with laughter, argument, ambition, and love. And so you rise and walk into the dawn, leaving the haunted plazas behind. The ruins fade in the first light, and you carry with you the knowledge that even when cities fall, humanity endures, reinventing, rebuilding, telling new stories in the shadow of the old. You move quietly now, slipping through the first warm beams of sunlight that creep over the bones of cities destroyed by war. There is a heaviness in your chest, the echo of ancient alarms and desperate last stands. But as the sky brightens, the source of dread changes once again. Now, as you step forward, the terror is not a screaming horde at the gates, but a hunger that creeps on little cat feet. You are walking into the long, quiet disaster of famine and drought, a kind of vanishing that comes not with fire or sword, but with silence and empty bowls. In the world of lost cities, famine is an invisible predator. It doesn't leave scars you can easily see. Instead, it leaves behind stories of slow despair, a tightening spiral as food runs out and hope wears thin. As you wander, you find yourself in a place that could be anywhere in the Americas. A sun-baked field in the shadow of old pyramids, or a half-wild garden where corn once grew tall and proud. The ground is cracked, dust swirling with every breeze. All around you the signs of hunger are subtle, a scatter of gnawed cobs, the faint traces of footpaths leading away, and the brittle stalks of abandoned fields. Imagine waking up every morning and measuring your life by the sound of your stomach. First you ration the food you have, making a little stretch farther each day. Then you start eating the things you never thought you'd eat. The wild greens, the roots dug up from the hard earth, the seeds you saved for planting. In the end, there is little left but hope, and even that grows thin. You hear old stories too, of people boiling leather, scraping bark from trees, eating clay or dirt just to quiet the ache. You walk past the skeleton of an ancient granary, its stone walls still holding the shape of abundance. Once these were vaults of plenty, filled to bursting with maize, beans, squash, and amaranth. Now they are empty, haunted by the memory of feasts and the soft, satisfied laughter of full bellies. You imagine the final days, a council of elders sitting in a circle, counting out kernels of corn, deciding who gets to eat and who must wait, every choice heavy, every meal a tiny act of hope or cruelty. Sometimes the disaster is sudden, a few failed harvests, and panic sets in. More often, though, it's a slow grind. The soil grows tired, the rains fail, pests arrive, the children get thinner, the old people fade, the festivals stop, the markets grow quiet. A mother wraps her arms around her child and whispers stories of better days, hoping her voice will fill the silence where supper used to be. In the Andes, whole cities once clung to terraced hillsides, their fate tied to the delicate dance of water and sun. The Inca and their ancestors were masters of irrigation, carving canals and reservoirs to catch every drop. But even the best engineering can't hold back the sky forever. When the droughts came, they were relentless. Springs dried up, crops withered, herds died. People prayed, bargained, sacrificed. But in the end, the only answer was to leave down the mountain paths, into the unknown, carrying what little they could. Elsewhere, among the great cities of the southwest, the story was much the same. The Hopi, the Zuni, the ancestors of the Pobloans, each depended on the gifts of rain. Their ceremonies and dances were prayers for water, for the clouds to gather, for the corn to ripen. But sometimes the sky turned away. In the ruins you can see the signs: irrigation channels choked with silt, storage jars abandoned half full, a house left in such a hurry that the last meal was never finished. The stories of famine aren't only about hunger, they're about movement, resilience, and impossible choices. People moved, always searching for a better place, a spring that hadn't dried up, a valley where rain still fell, a forest with wild game. Sometimes entire villages travel together, sometimes families scattered, each hoping for a scrap of luck. The land is filled with ghost paths, the lines where feet wore the grass thin as they sought out hope in a landscape growing ever more hostile. But not everyone could leave. Some stayed, clinging to the land out of loyalty, stubbornness, or sheer exhaustion. These are the people who tried new things, new crops, new ways of storing food, new rituals to coax life from tired soil. Occasionally, their gambles paid off, and a city was reborn, smaller but alive. More often, the city simply faded, its people swallowed by the world beyond, blending into neighboring towns, leaving only the faintest trace that they'd ever been here at all. You pause in the shade of a half-collapsed house, its walls etched with the soot of old cooking fires. There is a faint smell of earth and ashes, and the breeze brings the distant sound of birds. You imagine the last family who lived here, each meal growing smaller, the table quieter. Maybe they argued, maybe they cried, maybe they sat in silence, counting the days until the next rain. Sometimes, hunger led to desperate measures. In stories passed down, you hear of raids, neighbors stealing from neighbors, villages raiding distant stores, even families splintering under the pressure of need. Old friendships broke down, suspicion grew like weeds, trust once so strong withered faster than the corn. The memory of these times lingers, a warning hidden in lullabies and old songs. Yet there is resilience here too. Hunger might scatter a city, but it also knits people together in strange, unexpected ways. New alliances formed, new routes were carved through the wilderness, new foods were discovered and shared. The old recipes gave way to new ones, meals made of whatever the land could give, spiced with a kind of hope that survives even the darkest hunger. You find yourself at the edge of a dry well, the stones worn smooth by countless hands. Once this well was a miracle, a place where water bubbled up, cool and sweet. Now, it is only a hole in the earth, half filled with dust and regret. Still, someone has left an offering, perhaps a flower, or a handful of beads, a silent plea to the spirits of the place. Even when hope is thin, people leave their prayers for tomorrow. You keep moving, and in the distance, you see the remnants of an orchard, rows of trees, their fruit long gone, their branches twisted by years of neglect. The ground is littered with fallen branches, the grass brown and brittle. Yet here and there, you find signs of stubborn life, a sapling growing from an old stump, a cluster of wildflowers at the edge of the field, a patch of green clinging to the shadow of a wall. The memory of famine lingers in the landscape. It's in the terraces that step up the mountains, in the canals that curve through the desert, in the stories whispered around fires on cold nights. People remember, and in remembering, they build anew. They teach their children to plant a little extra, to save for hard times, to share when they can. Every vanished city leaves behind not only ruins, but lessons about endurance, ingenuity, and the fierce will to survive. You rest now at the edge of a field, letting the sun warm your back. You close your eyes and imagine a time when this place was green and full of life. You hear the laughter of children, the calls of farmers, the songs of women grinding maize. For a moment, you can almost taste the bread and stew, feel the fullness of a world that trusted in the cycles of rain and sun. Then, as the memory fades, you open your eyes and see the truth. The cycles can be broken, the world can change, and sometimes you have to change with it. As dusk approaches, you stand and stretch, bones creaking like the branches of the orchard. The city is gone, the people scattered, but the story remains, the story of hunger and hope, of endings and new beginnings. You promise to remember them, to carry their lessons forward, to honor the vanished cities by building your own with care, gratitude, and a stubborn, unyielding belief in tomorrow. And as night falls, you walk away, the earth cool beneath your feet, the stars bright above. In the silence left by famine, you find a whisper of resilience, a reminder that even when the bowls are empty and the fields are bare, the heart can still dream of plenty. The air changes as you continue your wandering. The hunger and thirst of famine linger in your bones. But now you sense a more sudden, unpredictable force, an energy that can unmake a city not over decades, but in the space of a single, shattering day or night. You are stepping into the realm of natural disasters, where earth and sky conspire to remind humans how small they really are. Some cities vanish in slow motion, but some are swallowed in an instant by a shudder in the ground, a river that leaps its banks, a mountain that wakes with fire, or a wind that flattens all in its path. You walk the edge of a great lake, let's say it's Lake Atatlan in Guatemala, its water still as glass beneath the early dawn. The air is heavy with mist, and your steps are muffled by wet grass. For centuries, villages and cities have clustered along this shore, drawn by fish, fertile land, and the gentle beauty of sunrise on water. But if you look closely, you see the traces of older towns' walls just visible beneath the surface, stones laid by hands now long gone. Legends whisper that one night, centuries ago, a mountain gave way, sending a flood racing down to the lake. In the chaos, whole villages disappeared, their lights blinking out all at once. In the morning there was only silence, and the water's patient sweep. Natural disasters are the wild card in the story of cities. No matter how clever your engineers, how deep your wells or high your walls, sometimes the world itself simply says enough. The earth shakes, the sky darkens, the river changes course. All your plans, your hopes, your memories can be buried in a moment. You shiver a little, thinking of the ways people lived always with one wary eye on the horizon. You move through a city that was once mighty, a place like Cibola or Chanchan, or the legendary cities beneath the shadow of the Popocatépetl volcano. Imagine a day like any other, merchants hawking their goods in the market, children laughing, cooks stirring pots of stew. The sun is bright, and the air hums with ordinary life. Then in an instant, everything changes. The ground bucks and rolls, throwing people to their knees. Buildings crack, walls tumble. A sound like the earth itself crying out fills the air. Earthquakes have always been a fact of life in the Americas. Great cities have risen near fault lines, sometimes for the fertile soils, sometimes for sacred reasons, sometimes for the convenience of rivers and trade routes. But the risk is always there, sleeping beneath the surface. In a big quake, stone buildings crumble. The shaking goes on, seconds that feel like hours. When it stops, a city that took centuries to build can be reduced to dust and memory. But earthquakes are only one danger. In the highlands and valleys, volcanoes keep their own uneasy watch. Picture the city of Pompeii, but set in Ecuador or Mexico, whole towns living in the shadow of a mountain that seems benign, until one night it explodes. Ash rains down, choking the sky. Lava pours through streets and fields. People run, carrying what they can, but the world they knew is gone before dawn. Sometimes, as at Lake Atitlan or along the slopes of Cotopaxi, entire communities are lost beneath layers of ash and mud. For centuries, all that's left is a bump in the land, a rumor, a story told by those who survived. Water is as powerful as fire. You pause on the banks of a river, let's say the Mississippi, broad and brown, its currents hiding the bones of old cities. Cahokia, great as it was, built its fortunes on the river's gifts. Fish, water for crops, a highway for trade. But rivers are fickle friends. In wet years they spread blessings. In bad ones they flood and destroy. Archaeologists sometimes find whole neighborhoods buried in layers of silt, evidence of a great flood that came in the night, sweeping away homes, silencing the clamor of daily life. Or they find the opposite, a city abandoned when the river changed course, leaving fertile fields stranded, wells suddenly dry. You walk the line between awe and fear, knowing that natural disasters leave marks as permanent as any war. Sometimes the signs are obvious. a layer of volcanic ash in the soil, a wall cracked and buckled, a village frozen in the moment of its ending. Sometimes the clues are softer, stories of the night the stars fell, or a carving that shows water where there should have been none. People remember, even if the memory is cloaked in myth. In the north, storms can be just as deadly. You picture the Mississippian cities, their palisades battered by tornadoes, their fields flattened by hail. In the Andes, a blizzard can arrive out of nowhere, catching shepherds far from home. For the peoples of the Caribbean, hurricanes are an old enemy, their howling winds able to level a city in hours. You think of how each generation learned to read the signs, clouds piling up on the horizon, the smell of rain, the uneasy silence before disaster struck. But there is another side to these stories: survival. In every ruined city you find traces of people who refused to give up. They rebuilt, moving houses to higher ground, planting new fields, inventing new ways to live with risk. Some learned to build walls that flexed instead of broke. Others chose new sites altogether, leaving behind old ghosts for a new beginning. Sometimes disaster was the spark for invention, for the birth of new traditions, new gods, new songs of hope. You stop by a broken wall, half buried in earth and wildflowers, and let your fingers trace the stones. Who built this? Did they see the end coming? Did they have a chance to say goodbye? Or did the mountain, river, or sky simply take it all away in a heartbeat? The humility in this moment is a lesson as old as time. You may plan, you may build, but you cannot control the world. Still, the people of vanished cities left their mark. They carved warnings in stone, planted sacred trees to mark flood levels, told stories around the fire of the day the world nearly ended. Some memories became rituals, offerings to the volcano, dances to call back the rain, songs to quiet the river's rage. Children learned them without knowing their origins, but the wisdom was there, buried in the rhythm of daily life. Night deepens, and you sit beside a pool of water, the stars reflected in its surface. You think of all the cities lost to fire, flood, or shaking earth, and you realize that, in a way, the disaster is never truly final. The place goes silent. Yes, people scatter, but after a while, new life creeps in. Plants take root, animals make their homes, and sometimes humans return, drawn by memory, by hope, or just the beauty of a place too wonderful to abandon forever. You hear in the distance the soft sigh of wind in the trees, the chirp of a night insect, the lapping of water on stone. These are the songs that remain after the end. You feel, too, the faint pulse of the earth beneath you, steady, timeless, patient. You remember that for every city lost to disaster, there are lessons etched into the ground, and courage woven into every new beginning. You stand and the dawn is breaking golden pink over the horizon. In the light, the ruins look softer, less tragic, more like part of the land than something separate. You realize finally that even the most sudden, shocking endings become stories in time. Stories that remind us of fragility, yes, but also of endurance, imagination, and the endless dance between loss and renewal. As you walk away, you carry the memory of all the vanished cities undone by disaster. You carry their stories as warnings, but also as reminders that the world goes on. Cities rise, fall, and sometimes against all odds rise again, reborn from ash and mud and silence, as long as there are people willing to hope. You walk now with a different heaviness, a quiet, creeping awareness that sometimes cities are not destroyed in a single, spectacular disaster, but are worn away slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, by their own success. Tonight, you wander through the ruins of a place that, once upon a time, must have seemed unbreakable, a metropolis so clever and prosperous that nobody inside could have imagined its end. But here you are, tracing your hand along the broken spine of a vanished world, learning that even the greatest cities can vanish if they ask too much from the land that feeds them. This is the story of overexploitation of resources that ran dry, of ambition that outpaced wisdom, and of communities that could not or would not slow down. In the soft twilight, you find yourself on a path that could be anywhere, beneath the tangled green of a Mesoamerican jungle, among the terraces of the Andes, across the prairie hills where Cahokia once rose, or in the thirsty shadows of the American Southwest. Everywhere you look, you see the faded bones of prosperity, stone walls, canals, roads, the clever traces of fields and gardens. The place feels abandoned but not tragic. The silence is less a scream than a long, exhausted sigh. Imagine for a moment what it felt like to live here at the city's peak. The granaries were full, the markets bustling, the fields green and thick with maize, beans, squash, and amaranth. Traders arrived from far away, their packs heavy with copper, obsidian, salt, and brightly colored feathers. Families built bigger homes, painted their walls, and gave thanks to the gods for the plenty all around them. Festivals lasted for days, and the city's leaders congratulated themselves on their cleverness and foresight. But with every harvest, every celebration, the city pressed harder on the land. More forests cleared, more fields planted, more mouths to feed. Every year, a little more wood cut for fuel, a little more soil scraped from the hillside to make terraces, a little more game hunted from the forests. You pause beside a half-collapsed house and pick up a handful of earth, rich, dark, and crumbly, but you know from the stories that all things have their limit. The first signs of trouble might have seemed small, a little less firewood, a spring that dried up early, a few years when the fish were smaller, or fewer. Maybe someone noticed that it took longer to walk to the good hunting grounds, or that the hillsides looked a bit barer, a bit more scarred. But who wants to believe the good times will ever end? You imagine the debates, old voices warning to slow down, young ones laughing it off, city leaders promising it's only a bad season and next year will be better. But the city keeps growing, the appetite never quite satisfied. More people, more houses, more fields until the hillsides start to slip, the rivers run muddy, the best land turns to dust. You see it now as you walk. Gullies cut deep into the fields, bare rocks where once there was thick grass, the ghosts of orchards choked by weeds. In the jungle, great trees once shaded cool, clean water, but now the sun bakes empty clearings, and the streams run low and hot. Resource depletion is rarely dramatic. No great battle, no earthquake or eruption. Instead, it's a slow unraveling. The crops grow thinner each year, and the forests don't come back as quickly as they're cut. The herds move farther away or disappear. Bit by bit, the city tightens its belt, stretching rations, working harder for less, inventing new ways to coax life from exhausted land. You wander through the shell of what was once a grand marketplace. The stalls are gone, but the stones remember, the shouts of hawkers, the laughter of children running between baskets of beans and peppers, the scent of roasted meat and sweet cakes. Imagine the day when the market first shrank, when there were fewer vendors, fewer customers, more empty spaces. You can almost hear the arguments over prices, over the last sack of grain, over who got to draw water first from the dwindling well. Every city tried to adapt. Some tried to expand, sending traders farther, seeking new sources of food and wood and stone. Others turned inward, rationing, inventing new technologies, planting different crops, praying more fervently to the old gods, and sometimes inventing new ones. Sometimes it worked, for a while. Sometimes it only delayed the end. You find yourself in the ruins of a storage pit, the earth around it, riddled with the burrows of animals, reclaiming what people left behind. In the Andes, the Incas mastered terracing and irrigation, but even their skills had limits. When the land could give no more, when the people refused to move or change their ways, whole villages emptied. In the jungles, the Maya cut down more forest to make space for corn and to fuel the lime kilns that built their shining cities. But the trees kept the soil in place and called the rain. Without them, droughts grew worse, and floods came faster. You run your hand over the stones and feel the lesson, sharp as a thorn. What you take must also be given back. or the land will reclaim itself in the end. The stories of overexploitation are full of ironies. The more successful a city was, the greater the danger it faced. The very skills that built prosperity, ambition, organization, technology could, if not checked, drive a city past the point of no return. It's hard to notice when you're living through it. Every year feels much like the last, until suddenly nothing works as it should. The fields refuse to yield, the wells run dry, and people begin to leave, not in a panic, but in a slow, steady trickle. You walk along the edge of what was once a vast field, now overgrown and silent. Here and there you spot stones that were once part of a wall, and the faint lines of old terraces, soft under new grass. Somewhere, there are seeds still sleeping in the earth, waiting for a time when the land is ready again. That's the quiet hope in every abandoned place. The land remembers, and one day, life will return. But for those who stayed to the end, the world grew smaller, harder, more anxious. Families argued over scraps, leaders made desperate promises, and old traditions began to fray. You sit on a stone beneath a twisted tree and imagine the last great festival, half the usual food, half the usual crowd, the music played a little softer, the dances shorter and more subdued. Maybe, at the edge of the crowd, someone watched the darkness and wondered if the city could survive one more year. Sometimes, there are records etched in stone, painted on walls, scratched onto pottery, of leaders boasting about building more, growing more, taking more. Rarely do you find the words of those who wanted less, who urged caution and patience. Those voices are lost, buried in the silence that follows when the city finally empties. The end comes not with a bang, but with a soft, stubborn silence. The fields go fallow, the market stalls rot, the roads fill with weeds. A few stubborn families stay, hoping things will turn around. Sometimes they do, and a smaller, humbler community survives. More often, though, the last ones finally leave. The city fades into myth, and the land begins its long, slow healing. You rise and walk through the ruins, heart heavy but hopeful. You notice new life everywhere. Saplings in the cracks of old temples, wildflowers in abandoned fields, birds nesting in forgotten towers. The lesson of overexploitation is not just one of loss, but of renewal. The land is patient, and life returns, given time and care. You promise yourself to remember that every city is only a guest, that true prosperity comes not from taking all you can, but from learning to live within limits. As you leave, the first stars appear above the silent ruins. You feel the land breathing around you, restoring, forgiving, promising a future to anyone willing to listen. You carry that hope with you, the stubborn belief that the mistakes of the past can teach us to build better, to cherish what we have, and to remember that the greatest wealth is not what we take, but what we leave behind. You step forward, feeling the ruins of old ambition give way beneath your feet, and as you walk, the air thickens with a tension that feels different, more sudden, more violent, and marked by a chilling certainty that some cities didn't simply fade or wear themselves out. Tonight you walk into the aftermath of conquest. You hear the echoes of voices not born in these lands, strange words, hard accents, the clatter of steel on stone. Now you find yourself in a city just before it disappears, as the first shadows of Spanish armor stretch across the plazas, and the world's oldest stories crash into something brand new. The arrival of the conquistadors. If you listen, you can almost hear the difference before you see it. Cities in the Americas, up to this point, rose and fell for reasons deeply rooted in the land: climate, famine, overuse, disaster, and the quarrels and alliances of their own people. But in the 1500s, new forces arrived on wooden ships, carrying not only swords and cannons, but also a hunger for gold, a hunger for souls, and a deep, ruthless certainty that everything here was theirs for the taking. The people called them by many names, sometimes gods, sometimes devils, but mostly, in the end, destroyers. You arrive at the gates of a city that might be Tenoch, Titlan, mighty capital of the Mexica, or Cuzco, navel of the Inca world. Or it could be any one of 1,000 smaller cities whose names are barely a whisper now. The first thing you see is that the city is alive, even vibrant. Markets hum with business, canals teem with canoes, banners snap in the breeze, and stone palaces gleam beneath the sun. It's a world that believes itself, with good reason, to be the center of everything. But just beyond the horizon, the world is ending. The conquistadors arrived as storms do, unexpected, destructive, and utterly unstoppable. They came from a world riven by its own wars and desperate for treasure, carrying steel and horses and the gunpowder scent of modern war. But they also carried ideas and diseases and ambitions so vast that no city, no matter how mighty, could withstand the weight. You walk among the people in those final days. They are nervous, but not afraid in the way they should be. Messengers bring news of strangers with strange beasts and shining skins. Some elders whisper that these are omens, fulfillments of prophecy. Others say they are just men, greedy and lost, who will leave soon enough. No one imagines how quickly everything will change. Soon the invaders are at the gates. Negotiations begin, as they always do. Gifts, feasts, rituals, the cautious exchange of words and expectations. But behind every gesture is a calculation. The conquistadors want gold, and when the gifts are not enough, they want authority, and when it is not given, they demand. When their demands are refused, violence is never far behind. The story of conquest is a story of betrayal layered on misunderstanding. The people of these cities are proud, clever, and fiercely organized, but they do not know how to fight ghosts, diseases that weaken their armies before a sword is ever drawn, or guns that strike from a distance, or horses that turn familiar streets into chaos. When fighting comes, it is brutal and bewildering. The defenders are brave, but outmatched. The city's streets run with confusion and fear. You stand at the edge of a causeway, watching as people try to escape. Families clutching children, warriors rallying for a hopeless stand, priests pleading with the gods, whose altars are suddenly silent. The sky is thick with smoke, the air stinks of fear. In some places, the city burns. In others, it is simply abandoned, left for the conquerors to claim as their prize. After the fall, the conquerors set about remaking the city in their own image. Temples are pulled down, churches rise in their place, statues are shattered, gold is melted, sacred manuscripts are burned in great piles, their wisdom turning to ash in the morning sun. The conquerors give new names to the streets, new gods to the people, new rules to the world. Those who resist are punished, sometimes with a cruelty that leaves scars on the land for centuries. Those who survive learn to hide their memories, to tell their stories in whispers, to weave the old gods and new saints together in a tapestry of survival. But even the greatest conquerors cannot erase a city completely. Beneath every new cathedral, beneath every market, the bones of the old world remain. In Tenochtitlan, you feel it in the shape of the streets, the faint memory of water where canals once ran. In Cuzco, the stones of the Inca temples still form the foundations of Spanish churches. The old cities endure, not as they once were, but as ghosts haunting the palaces and plazas of their conquerors. You pass through these places, feeling the heaviness of loss, but also the persistence of memory. In quiet corners, old ways survive. People plant corn in secret, tell stories in a language the priests cannot understand, offer a prayer to the mountains before kneeling to the new god in the church. The city is gone, but it is not forgotten. Not by those who remember, not by those who live on its bones. There is a kind of resistance in remembrance. Every vanished city destroyed by conquistadors leaves behind not just ruins, but a fierce, stubborn determination to survive. You see it in the fiestas that blend Catholic saints with ancient spirits, in the crafts and songs that echo the old world beneath the surface of the new. Even the conqueror's own descendants sometimes look back with wonder or regret, piecing together what was lost and what was preserved in secret. As you wander the city's edges, you think about all the ways the old and new worlds are layered atop each other, each refusing to vanish entirely. A cathedral that was once a temple, a market that sits atop a palace, a festival that honors both a Christian saint and a mountain spirit. You see children playing games that would have been familiar to their ancestors, eating food that grows from the same earth, speaking words that survived centuries of silence. The story of conquest is also the story of survival. For every city destroyed, there are people who rebuild, who blend the old and new, who refuse to be erased. There are stories of collaboration as well as resistance, alliances made with the newcomers, marriages that stitch together two worlds, new cultures born in the shadow of loss. The vanished cities are never truly gone, so long as their stories are told. You pause at the edge of a ruined wall, where a single flower grows. It is not the flower you expect, a bright marigold perhaps, or a wild bloom whose name you do not know. You realize that life, even after the worst destruction, finds a way. That flower grows from the bones of the city, fed by the memories of those who loved this place, who fought for it, who refused to forget. As you leave the city behind, the sounds of conquest fade, but you carry the echo of 1,000 vanished cities with you. Their stories are tangled, tragic, beautiful, and endlessly alive. They whisper in the wind, in the stones, in the dreams of everyone who walks these lands today. You walk on, knowing that for all the cities erased by steel and greed, their shadows remain, stubborn as the sunrise, patient as the earth. And in every new beginning, every stubborn act of memory, you see proof that even the greatest violence cannot silence the human heart. You move onward, leaving the hush of broken traditions behind you. There's a softness to the night now, a sense that what remains is less about stone and earth and more about shadows, rumor, and wonder. In this next stretch of your journey, you walk not through streets or ruins, but through the space between memory and imagination. Tonight you are drifting into the legends born from emptiness, myths and stories that swirl wherever cities have disappeared and silence has grown thick. You are about to see how mystery itself becomes a kind of presence, and how the stories we tell about vanished places can be almost as powerful as the cities themselves. The first thing you notice is how quickly the mind fills an empty space. Walk through any lost city after dark, and your thoughts leap to fill the gaps. Who lived here? Why did they go? What was the last thing they saw or said? Whole civilizations, once so practical and real, slip into legend as soon as the last candle gutters out. The stories that arise, whispered by travelers, recorded by the first returning explorers passed between generations, grow wild and beautiful, unconstrained by fact. Sometimes they're about gods and monsters, sometimes they're about lost treasures, curses, or secret wisdom waiting to be found. You pause at the edge of an old plaza, half swallowed by weeds and moonlight. Somewhere nearby, a nightbird sings, and you feel the hair rise on your arms. There are no answers here, only the questions that give rise to legend. In the Americas, the lost cities are so many that almost every region has its own stories, some about sudden disappearances, others about towns that sleep under spells, or ruins watched by guardian spirits. These legends are patchwork quilts of hope, fear, and longing, a way for people to keep the memory of a place alive, even when the facts have faded into mystery. Take, for example, the tales of the Maya cities, swallowed by jungle and silence. For centuries, people living nearby wondered at the overgrown temples and carved stones. Who built this? Was it giants, or gods, or a people so wise they could speak to the stars? Some said the cities vanished because their builders grew too proud. Others believed the people turned into animals or birds, returning only at night to dance in the ruins. Still others spoke of great treasures hidden deep in the earth, golden idols, books of unbreakable wisdom, or seeds for crops that would never fail. Each story says more about the teller than the city itself. Or consider the American Southwest, where the ancestral Puebloans vanished from their cliff dwellings. Even today, there are stories told by descendants, travelers, and the curious about a great migration, or a people called away by voices in the wind, or a curse that fell upon the land when certain taboos were broken. Some say the kivas, those round ceremonial rooms, are portals to another world, and on certain nights you can still hear the echoes of ancient chants rising up through the rock. You follow a narrow trail, the ground soft with fallen leaves, and you think about Cahokia, a city so vast and organized it could hardly be believed by the first Europeans who saw its ruins. For years, people doubted it could have been built by Native Americans, so the stories shifted. Maybe it was a city of lost Egyptians, or Vikings, or survivors from Atlantis. Maybe the mound builders had magical powers, or had struck some bargain with spirits that finally came to collect their due. All these legends swirl together, layering the truth with dreams, suspicions, and longing for connection to something greater than ourselves. The Amazon, too, is thick with stories of lost cities: El Dorado, Paititi, Sidi, and more. These aren't just tales for explorers, they're hopes made into geography, maps drawn from desire as much as from evidence. Every discovery of a ruined earthwork or a buried village is greeted as proof. See, it was real. There was a city here waiting for us all along. And each new legend inspires another generation to search, to wonder, to keep the mystery alive. You pause by a stream that winds through the ruins, watching the water catch the stars. This too has its stories. Some believe the spirits of lost cities live in the rivers, or in the stones, or in the animals that return to reclaimed plazas. There are stories of cities that appear only on certain nights, revealed by moonlight or mist, and vanish again by dawn. In some places, people believe you should never sleep within the ruins, or you'll wake changed, marked by the spirits, or lost forever, wandering among ghosts. But not all legends are dark. Many are stories of hope, cities waiting to be found, knowledge preserved against disaster, secret refuges where a vanished people live on in peace. The idea of hidden cities is as old as human imagination. In the Andes, there are tales of villages built so cleverly they cannot be seen, whose people emerge at night to tend the fields and then slip back into the mountain at sunrise. Some say that when the world is ready, the lost ones will return, bringing wisdom and plenty. You wander through this forest of myth, realizing that the stories are a kind of survival. When a city disappears, the memory of its people is carried forward by those who remain, shaped and reshaped by need, grief, and hope. For the children who grow up hearing these stories, the vanished city is as real as any fact, maybe more so because it lives not in books or stones, but in the imagination, in the very air they breathe. You think about the human need for answers, for meaning. When faced with the mystery of disappearance, it's almost unbearable to say I don't know. And so we invent gods, punishments, miracles, secret doors. We fill the gaps with stories, because a good story soothes the ache of not knowing. Even now, with satellites and science and teams of archaeologists, the heart wants to believe that some mysteries are just out of reach, safe from logic, alive in the dark corners of the world. You find yourself sitting on a low stone, heart beating quietly as you listen to the wind. What legends will people tell of your own city, centuries from now? If it were to vanish, would your daily routines become epic adventures? Would your favorite places be haunted by strange spirits? The myths we leave behind, you realize, say as much about our fears and hopes as they do about what actually happened. The legends of vanished cities become a kind of inheritance, a way for each generation to shape the past to its own needs. When times are hard, the stories warn, don't be like them, be humble, be wise. When times are hopeful, the stories promise there are wonders waiting, if only you dare to seek. Sometimes the line between warning and hope blurs, and the legends do both at once. As you stand and prepare to leave the realm of myth, you realize that the silence left by vanished cities is never truly empty. It's filled with echoes, the voices of those who left, those who remained and those who only dreamed. The stories grow and change, but the heart of the mystery remains. Why did they leave, and what did they hope to find? The answer is always just out of reach, calling to the next wanderer to step into the unknown and listen. You walk away, comforted by the realization that as long as stories are told, nothing truly vanishes. The legends will keep watch, guarding the ruins and inviting the curious to look a little deeper, to listen a little harder, to wonder, always wonder, about the worlds that came before. The night feels gentler as you keep walking, fewer harsh edges, fewer questions left raw and aching. You sense the road is curling back toward the present, leading you out of the shadowed forests of legend and into a wide, open plain, where the air tastes new, the stars seem closer, and the weight of all those vanished cities settles into something almost peaceful. Now, you find yourself reflecting on the quiet lessons left behind, the whispers that history breathes into your ear if you're willing to listen. This last part of your journey is about understanding, about letting the lost cities speak, not only through their ruins and mysteries, but through the caution and hope they offer you. Here tonight, you stand for a moment at the top of a broad mound, the ghost of Cahokia beneath your feet. In the distance, forests sigh, rivers wind through the dark, and the land is layered with the memory of 1,000 vanished towns. You can feel them, even when you cannot see them, their stories woven into the air, the soil, the gentle hush of wind through the grass. It's easy to forget, sometimes, that entire cities once thrived where now there's nothing but silence, that generations lived, loved, suffered, dreamed, and then were gone. What, you wonder, are these cities really saying to you? Perhaps the first lesson is humility. Every city, no matter how powerful, how grand, how self-assured, believed itself built to last. The great plazas of Tenochtitlan, the terraces of the Andes, the markets of Cahokia, the sacred jungles of the Maya, the hidden causeways beneath the Amazon, all were made with faith in tomorrow, yet each in time became grass, rubble, or myth. It's a reminder that nothing in the world is too big to fail, not even us, not even now. But there's another lesson, the astonishing resilience of hope. For every city that vanished, people found ways to endure. Survivors left to build new homes, new towns, new customs, carrying the memory of what was lost, and sometimes the seeds of something better. Sometimes the vanished city reappeared in a new place under a new name, or as the silent wisdom in a story told by firelight, and sometimes all that survived was a stubborn spark, the determination to begin again no matter how complete the darkness. You remember how every vanished city left behind more than stones. They left behind questions too, and the courage to ask them. Why did this place thrive? Why did it fail? What mattered most to the people who lived here, and what mattered too little, too late? The answers are never simple. Sometimes the land changed, sometimes the sky. Sometimes the people demanded too much from their world. Sometimes strangers arrived and rewrote the story overnight. But always, the lesson is clear: to endure, a city or a person must learn, adapt, and remember. As you walk the broad avenue of memory, you think of all the little choices that add up to survival, to share food in times of famine, to listen for the change in the wind, to keep a story alive, even when the world seems determined to forget. You see how the slow collapse of one city might give rise to another's golden age, how failure can be the seed of hope, and how, in the end, it's the stories, the wisdom, the warnings, the laughter and sorrow passed down that really last. The lost cities teach you to honor both ambition and limits, to plan boldly, but to respect the land, to build but to leave space for mystery and for dreams, to remember that your own world, for all its wonders and cleverness, is just as fragile as any that came before, and to take comfort too in knowing that nothing truly disappears, not while someone remembers, not while stories are told. As dawn softens the horizon, you sit for a while on a stone that's outlasted 10 centuries of sun and rain. The silence is deep, but not empty. It is full of distant music, the echo of a flute, the murmur of markets, the soft cadence of voices telling stories in the dark. For a moment you're both alone and part of something vast, a quiet network of dreamers, wanderers, and rememberers stretching across the centuries. You realize finally that the lesson of vanished cities isn't just about loss, but about connection. You are connected to those who built and lost, to those who wondered and wandered, to all the voices known and unknown that shaped the world you walk in. Even as the cities vanish, the links remain in the earth beneath your feet, in the stories you carry, in the hopes you share for a kinder future. You rise, the day brightening around you, and let the lessons of the lost cities settle gently into your bones. Their wisdom is quiet, but stubborn. Be humble, be curious, be resilient. Honor the stories that made you and the mysteries that still wait in the shadows. You walk onward, out of the mists of the past and into the new day, carrying with you not only the memory of vanished cities, but also the calm certainty that, as long as we listen, as long as we dream, we are never truly alone. So now, as the journey comes to a gentle close, feel the night settle softly around you. The questions and mysteries of the lost cities drift away, leaving you lighter, quieter, wrapped in a warmth that asks nothing but rest. The world outside your window is still, and in that stillness you sense the patient heartbeat of all the places and people that came before you, alive, not in stone but in memory, in wonder, in the endless human hope for meaning. Let your breath slow, your body grow heavy, and let the whispers of history become a gentle lullaby. Imagine the soft grass under your head, the cool hush of night breezes through ancient trees, the distant shimmer of stars over ruins long at peace. You are safe here, carried on the stories of those who walked these paths before. Every vanished city, every quiet field, every forgotten song is a thread in the great blanket of time, wrapped now around your shoulders. There is nothing left you need to do, no answers you must find tonight. All you have to do is rest. Let your thoughts drift like clouds over silent plazas, like rivers through sleeping forests. Know that you are part of this story too, a dreamer, a listener, a gentle soul in a world that is always turning, always changing, always remembering. So close your eyes, breathe deep, and let go. The lost cities are watching over you, their lessons and laughter settled in the hush. Sleep well, knowing that history holds you close, and that morning will bring you quietly back, refreshed, calm, and carrying the peace of vanished worlds into the new day. Sweet dreams.